Welcome to Leaders Upgraded, the place where people who want to upgrade and fast track their career, their life, and their leadership journey tend to gather. I am your host, Tanvi Gautam, and I shall be speaking to the top 10% of the world's leading authors, CEOs, coaches, and thinkers to bring you some of the best and brilliant ideas to fast track your way to success. Would you like an upgrade? Let's do this.
There has been so much talk of late about fractional roles and the way the industry and the economic environment is going. A lot of people are thinking about going independent. But what does it really take? In the Leaders Upgraded podcast, we have talked about this issue in the past with Abhijit Bhadri. So you may want to go to the archives of the podcast and find that episode as well, because we had a big conversation about what do corporate people not understand about going independent. And in some ways, we're going to be continuing this conversation with my guest today, Adrian Tan, who wrote a book called No More Bosses. I think a lot of us love the sound of that. For some of us, it's not really an option because of the realities of the corporate world right now, where layoffs have been so common. And other people are already thinking about it because they are wondering if there is anything known as career security left anymore. Let me bring on stage our guest today, Adrian Tan. Welcome to the show, Adrian.
Thanks, Tanvi. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be on the show.
I would like to begin with a complaint about your book.
Go ahead.
And the complaint is this. Actually, is it a complaint or a confession? I don't know. It was very difficult to read your book. And the reason it was very difficult was because it was full of so many valuable tools and tips that I had to stop every page and keep going back to trying it out, and just went down a rabbit hole. So I tell you, it's such a time-intensive book because it has so much value packed in it. Nobody will ever get through it at one round. So thank you for adding so many interesting tools and things to try. It's a very practical book. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, and you're most welcome. I draw that inspiration from Tim Ferriss' book, The 4-Hour Work Week, which I also had trouble finishing very efficiently because there's just so many tips, so many practical takeaways from the book versus some other book which are really very conceptual in nature. You can finish it almost immediately in half a day, but after the book, you're like, what did I learn from it? And I'm very certain 3 weeks later, you can barely remember what you read. So I hope the takeaways, the practical aspect of it really help people, at least for that one particular tip, which will have a very significant impact on how you navigate your life from that point onwards.
I agree. Sometimes I pick up a book and I'm like, this should have been an article. Why have they wasted? How many trees gave up their life so that somebody could call themselves an author? Fortunately, this is not one of those books. This is an extremely high value added, and I can see myself referring to it again and again. So let's get started with the questions. I think this topic is so relevant now more than ever. Tell us a little bit about your journey. What was the turning point for you when you said, I have had enough, I'm out of here?
I would say the turning points actually came in two phases. So the first one was in my last job where I had an argument with my boss. And it was over something that I actually posted on social media. So he insisted I take it down. I said no. And in a fit of anger, I said, okay, never mind, I quit. Obviously, the next day when things mellow down, I'm like, oh no, what did I say? The toothpaste is already out of the tube. You can't squeeze it back in. So I took it in stride, and my previous job was actually somewhat government. I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe I just go into private sector. Less bureaucratic bullshit over there. I was interviewing around, I was in advanced stages for a couple of them, and one of them, in my final interview, the person was telling me, oh, I heard you're somewhat of an influencer in your space. I said, yeah. We are quite concerned about your influencer status. So obviously he's seeing it from a negative perspective. If I say the wrong thing, it may impact the company and all that. So after the call, I'm like, I think no matter where I go, there seems to be some issue given who I already am. So why don't I just accept the fact that I'm unemployable and try to look for something else. Now, I have done businesses before in recruitment, in consultancy, so on. And for me to look into going out on my own, I would say I have a bit of experience, so the bar is slightly lower than most people. But for most of those other businesses, it was done in a team setting. So when I was in recruitment business, I had a team of, I think at our peak, 29 of us. So I was also thinking, do I really want to start another business to go through that initial phase? And I still get PTSD from my recruitment agency days when tomorrow is payday and we don't have enough money in the bank today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I really do not want to go through that stress anymore. I could probably have tolerated those stress really well in my mid-20s, but not when I'm in my mid-40s. There's just so much overthinking in my head right now. So I told myself, okay, I want to do something on my own, but I want to be independent. I do not want to manage people. As I shared with you during our pre-session, my take is I have trouble managing my own kids, let alone other people's kids. So I rather just manage myself.
Yeah, nothing like our kids to give us a real sense of our own competencies. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So
So yeah.
so so with that, I put out a LinkedIn post, literally almost an SOS that I'm going independent. If there's anything we can collaborate together, reach out to me. And at that point in time, I already had 2 teaching assignments. Yeah, the teaching assignments came after I realized I want to go independent. Those are easier to secure. And almost very shortly, I got another 3 assignments in doing different stuff, but also very marketing related within the HR space. And all in, I have 5 assignments. So I'm like, maybe there's something workable. Let's see how long this thing lasts. And that's the start of the journey.
Yeah, I think that we've been talking about things like portfolio careers from almost more than a decade ago. But a lot of it has been theory for a lot of people. But now it's becoming a reality in figuring out the different phases of one's career and the flexibility that one looks at various points in time. It really is what is the kind of career you're looking for that will give you the flexibility and the freedom that you want. And so I think what I'm hearing you say is that it's important to think about the various versions of going solo that you might be comfortable with. Some of us might say, all right, I'm going to go solo and I'm going to have a team that I'm going to work with. Others might say, I'm going to go solo and I would not like a team. Maybe I just work with part timers. And then I see a new group of people coming in whose approach is it's me and my 5 AI bots, and we're going to conquer the world with that. It's to each their own level of comfort. But you mentioned about having this almost like a PTSD around not being able to run the payroll. And I think one of the things that people who are thinking of switching out of the corporate world need to understand is the emotional roller coaster that going solo can be like. So I
Yep.
would love for you to share with us a couple of very common emotions, which I'm sure will definitely resonate with me. I've been on the dark side for a long time now, that they should be prepared for as they step out and start doing their own thing.
I think the first thing you have to be prepared for is you are not going to get 100% support, especially from the people closest around you to what you imagine. You would think that your spouse will support you, you would think that your closest friend will support you. Chances are they may not, and you have to be prepared for that. Not it's hard to infer who is right, who is wrong, and honestly, how would anyone know? But that is something that you have to gather support for. It's very much, I would say, in the corporate setting, when you want to push through a new project, you have to raise a proposal, you have to get buy-in. Same thing. If you want to get support from your friends, from the people that most matters to you, it would take a bit of effort. And the other thing is once you I guess the other most important thing, especially in the Singapore setting, is Singapore is quite an expensive place to live in. If you're alone, then I think it's fine. But if you have family, if you are starting out from a mid-career perspective like myself, chances are you have mortgage, you may have a expensive car, you may have kids you're trying to put through school and all that. All this adds up. And if you are not prepared with getting assignments quick enough, that's going to be a challenge. And of course, we've read enough to know that financial instability is always one of the number one cause of stress in many aspects of life. So you do not want to be paycheck to paycheck, struggling to put food on the table, which is one of the key reasons I see many people jumping back to corporate. Because maybe saying it's an easy way out is not the best way to frame it, but it is the best way for them to get back to some form of financial stability. So in my book, I talk about a friend of mine who runs a HR tech. He was in a cushy job. He was a regional director for the company. He had 3 kids at that point in time. And I asked him what's his motivation. One key motivation was he applied Jeff Bezos' regret minimization framework. So you do not want to 10 years later look back and regret he did not take that step. But the other thing is he had 18 months of runway. So that gave him sufficient time to push ahead, to pivot, to course correct and all that. Because whatever you have in mind, it likely wouldn't work from day one. You have to meander around, you have to seek validation, get feedback, and there's is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So those are situation and periods you have to buffer for financially. Otherwise, those emotional roller coaster will really get to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the preparation for takeoff has to start long before you are actually going to be taking off. And
Mm,
that needs you to be thinking, of course, about finances, but also the emotional grit and courage that it needs to stay the
mm,
course. I remember during the pandemic when a lot of my work came to a standstill. The keynotes got
mm,
cancelled, budgets were slashed, people went
mm,
into a holding pattern. And I remember thinking to myself that the pandemic is going to be a good test of separating the boys from the men and the girls from the
mm,
women, if I should say, because staying power is not just about finances. Staying power is
mm.
also a lot about the sense of vision and purpose that you have with why you started in the first place. And I tell you, honestly, there are days when I'm like, maybe I should go back to the corporate world. And then my husband has to remind me, he's like, you are no longer fit for the corporate world. And maybe he has a point. But there is something that we've been hearing a lot of late, the fractional roles that we hear
Mm.
about. What is a fractional role? Is it just another fancy term for a freelancer, a part-time employment,
Mm.
or what does it define being in a fractional role? I'd love to hear from you.
That's a great question. But before I touch on that, I want to admit on this session that occasionally, during my lowest days, I would also scroll through LinkedIn jobs and imagine how much easier it would be if I'm in one of those jobs. So back to your question, fractional is really a very new term, and I think if you ask 3 people, they may give you 3 different definitions. But at least my definition is it is really, okay, to really break it down in the most simplistic form, it is actually a part-time contractual engagement, no different from you hiring someone on a retainer or even hiring someone as a Upwork freelancer. But the key difference is in terms of the deliverables, it might not be as clear cut as your freelancer or your graphic designer because you are embedded or you're coming in from the strategic level, which is why if you look at the fractional term, it always goes with fractional CXO. So you are fractional CTO, fractional CFO, so on and so forth. So you're really coming in at a strategic level, and that is why the kind of deliverables may not be that clear cut, but it does have a significant impact on the progress and the prosperity of the business. So that's one thing. And most of the fractional people, because they are so embedded, they are almost treated like an employee within an organization. They have an email address, they have access to Slack, so on and so forth. So not much of a difference there. And the last bit is really the reduce time spent on each of their assignment. So for most company, they hire someone who is fractional. Firstly, of course, because the supply of the individual wants to work on a reduced work hours basis. So you are not paying a full rate. You're paying maybe instead of 40 hours a week, you're paying 20 hours a week. If you want to tap on people who are highly specialized, highly experienced, but you may not be able to afford at a full rate, there are very experienced people out there who prefer such arrangement for whatever reason. Maybe, oh, I'm in my semi-retirement mode. I just do not want to do 40 hours. I'm okay with 10. I'm okay with 20. Yeah. So that is how you continue to tap on their expertise that aligns with whatever your company is trying to do. So I would say those are the key differentiation as well as some of the similarities across what you may see in the part-time freelancing world.
So it seems more senior, more strategic, more embedded than just simply project work that you might come in and deliver for a month or two. And I think also the duration of the relationship is likely longer than other arrangements. Is
Oh
like,
yeah, absolutely.
like maybe 6 months to a year or more than that, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. I think HR departments are also learning to figure out how to deal with this new role. What's the level of access? What's the level of integration and all of that? So it's definitely an evolving space. For anyone who's listening to this, what do you think are some of the common misconceptions that people have? I think one of the common misconceptions is, okay, this is great flexibility. I am finally the master of my own time, which I think is true, but not in the sense that when work comes in, and there are times when there are dates when, for example, I'm like, why is it that three different clients want all the same date that I should go and deliver? So no, looks like I have flexibility, but then again, I don't, because I have to manage my calendar. I have to manage all these other clients all at the same time. So yes, there is flexibility, but no, there isn't. There is always a flip side.
Yep.
What do you think are some of the common misconceptions in the heads of people when they think about going solo or stepping out of the corporate world?
I think for anyone who is stepping out and going solo for the very first time, one of the key things they have to be mindful of is you are not just optimizing for maximum commercial gain. It's not just about making money. Honestly, I think if you just want to make most amount of money, it's really easier to stay with an organization. And in many cases, you can just coast the entire year and still get a fat bonus. But if you're solo and you want to achieve the same kind of results or even more of that, that means you're going to put in a lot of time commitment. Because ultimately, one thing about a solopreneur, in many aspects, unless of course you're creating a software and you just upload it somewhere and sell it, most of the things that you do require time as a resource, and you only have so much time. It is very tempting to just, okay, I'm on my own. Let me just put in another 2 hours. Let me skip lunch and use lunch hour as another hour to just work on stuff. And over time, you realize you are actually busier than before, which I feel may not really be the ideal outcome that you're looking for. Because ultimately, one thing about being solo is you also want to appreciate the freedom. You want to, okay, today is a good low-key day. Maybe I want to go JB because that is your down day. You can do stuff like that. But so those are stuff that people I think have to appreciate. You can, oh, it's a cool afternoon. Let me just bring my kids to the playground again because you can. So that is one thing. I heard this so many times. I remember during my book launch, someone the first few question was, how long did it take you to achieve the same kind of return, the same kind of financial return compared to your last job? So I think people have to be clear about that. As much as yes, it is I do agree that you need to balance things up, but there are also other aspect gain that you really want to make the best out of it, because if you are able to gain those time, and those time eventually are for you to spend on putting in more time at work, I feel the math just doesn't add up. It's okay, you finish, you took less 50% of the time needed to finish a piece of work. And then for the rest of the time that you save, you just find more work to do. It never ends, correct? So I think people have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I think work expense to fill the time available for it is one of those laws that one has read about. And also, with great freedom comes great responsibility, as they say. But I think it's completely on point that one big mental transition you have to make is learn to work with the cyclical nature of things that happen. There have been times when I'm handling 3 big change management projects at once, and there are times when I'm like, where did everybody go? And learning to keep your composure during that ups and down is very vital for your own emotional and mental well-being. And talking about emotional and mental well-being, it's so funny, Adrian. There was a time when anybody who was self-employed, and I'm talking of quite like maybe 15, 20 years ago, not now. People would almost look at them like, oh, so you were not good enough for the corporate world. So now you have to do your own. And the whole, it's come a full circle. Now, if you're doing your own thing, people actually tend to look upon it quite positively, like you're the next Jeff Bezos or something to come out there. But I want to talk about something that I know, in full confession, I've had to deal with sometimes when things are cyclical, which is social media envy. Especially when the downtimes and you go on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is this perfect feed of everybody's perfect life that is going perfectly well, no matter what might be the background. We all know that what is on LinkedIn is only a slice of it. I always like to keep it very real with the conversations I have here. So have you ever experienced that? And if you have, how do you tend to get back to your center?
Yes, I do experience it. And sometimes, no matter how mindful you are, especially on days which do not seem to go that well, you will just give in to whatever pulls you in from the social media. It's very easy to get envy over what you see online, and often forgetting that these are just highlight reels. They probably did 12 takes before you see this perfect shot. And this is exactly the case. There's a very funny channel on Instagram called Influencer in the Wild. It's so funny. It's just someone capturing how influencers are taking videos of themselves, and there was this most recent one on TikTok. And I think it really started on TikTok. You have people on video doing things like this because in
Yeah.
post-production they're going to put stuff here, right? But before post-production, you just see this idiot doing this. And those are things that people tend to overlook and tend to neglect. Now, the other thing that I'm also mindful of is mentioned and cited many times from Naval Ravikant. He talked about this as well. He said you cannot just take the best from everyone and be envious of that singular thing. Yeah, like for instance, you can be envious of Elon Musk's wealth, but if you want to be like him, you have to embrace everything about him.
Yes.
His political views, his four marriages, relationship with his kids, as everything, you have to adopt the entire package. So whoever you see online, same thing. And I captured that during over one social post where this very famous guy on LinkedIn was telling you what to do on LinkedIn every day in order to gain publicity or awareness. Oh, you have to push out so many posts, you have to comment like 50 times a day, connect and interact with 100 people a day, so on and so forth. In my mind, I'm like, that's a lot of time. Then I realized this guy has a wife, but they have no kids. So with that, you have a lot of bandwidth to do all those stuff versus someone like me. I have 4 kids, I have 2 dogs. That alone is already took up 3/4 of my day.
Yeah.
Where do I find the time to write 50 comments on LinkedIn and all that? So I think people have to be really mindful about who you are getting advice from, what is it that they share. And sometimes a lot of things is also about not what they say, but what they do. So you have to read more about the philosopher rather than the philosophy. And lastly, I've read this very funny quote about influencer, especially those who give you advice. The way that all these influencer or guru learn, actually the mistake of the people who took their advice.
That's entirely possible. I don't think that I have as one of my life goals that she live to feed the algorithm, which is, I think, altogether too common when you get onto that wheel. And it's interesting that when I was talking to one of my mentors, and it's like, don't you ever think you feel social media envy? And she said, never. And I said, how do you do that? And she said, look, even if I do feel it, the question I ask myself is, if I have got X units of energy and time in my life, where am I better spending it? Feeling envious of the other person or creating the life that I want to create for myself? Because energy is finite. So which direction do I want to send it? And I think the other thing that also I find helpful is stopping yourself when you feel that envy and saying, what is it about this person that is telling me that this is something that I would like in my life? It's turn it around into a signal for what would you like to do with yourself. And I suppose finally also being very realistic, like you said, about what are your life circumstances and what is it that is possible for you. We are not talking about 100-year life, Adrian. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And how do we do it in a manner that is sustainable for us and our families and the work deliverables with clients, spending time on gaming the algorithm? It's a real choice you have to make at the end of the day. And funny thing is this, I don't know, maybe you've come across this or not, but I have a couple of people who are following me who have started, I am pretty sure, using some sort of a bot for commenting because they seem to be commenting at the same time. It's a similar type of a thing. It's actually a thing. Like, I think at the end of the day, we may have like bots posting and bots talking to bots and people taking the human interaction offline. I don't know. This is getting a bit dystopian.
There are, by the way, apps that help you to comment. I'm not exactly sure about it done on a specific timing, but there are. So to your point, yes, I think in the near future, we would have articles or posts written by AI, articles commented by AI, articles read by AI. And I'm not sure who is at the either spectrum of this whole thing.
Let's get a little bit deeper. Let's assume that I have an idea and I would like to take it forward. How does one go about starting to validate, even when, say, one is in the corporate role? Are there ways in which one can start doing a test bed or a pilot? Or like, how does one even think about, is this an idea worth following or not? Like, what are the parameters or what are the questions you should be asking yourself?
I think within the startup world, they are very big on this thing called customer validation. So you got to go to your prospects and you got to interview a lot of them. For many startups, the expectation is at least 100, 80 to 100 of them, or even more. The more, the better, to validate whether your idea is sound and whether it will survive reality. Within the solopreneur space, of course, I don't think any one of us would have that bandwidth to ask or even know 100 over people to ask. The next best thing for me, I would imagine, is basically to sell a small portion, a subset of what you intend to do. I think this is more prevalent in, say, if I look at the fractional space, more so in the finance space. So I do know people who are like FC, financial controller of a company, MNC, and they would offer at a reduced, as a small retainer, their service to maybe a SME to help them with their books, to help them with their financial management. So it is more of a gig for you. It's more of a project. For a project to be translated to a retainer is much more easier than going cold into the market. So that is one thing. I think that validation is very important. The other thing is, of course, if you are keen to play the social media game, you can always talk up or continue to share more about what you do online and to see whether there are traction, there are inbound inquiry about what you do. That's very important. But I think ultimately is you want to secure something first before you even think about, okay, when I'm going to quit my job and all that. I remember this guy, he was a founder of a robo-advisor company called Bamboo, which just shut down recently. But when he first started, he was telling me he basically went around with a PowerPoint deck. He was selling before they even have the product. Until he got the first interest, okay, we are keen in a pilot, we've signed the contract, etc. Then he go and try to build that thing. And of course, he's a salesperson, so it make more sense for him. But I think for every solopreneur, whether you like it or not, you have to be a salesperson. You have to be a part-time salesperson of yourself, of your service, so you don't have a choice. And the best thing is to sell before you even have the product, or to sell before you even, or maybe just to sell a small fraction of it. You don't have to sell the entire furniture set. Just sell the small little bar stool or something. So if there's a lot of traction there, then you can try to expand your offering and move from there. Don't go to the market cold and quit your job the day before, go to the market cold and expect miracles to happen. Miracles often do not happen. They only happen during movies.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the questions, if any. So if you're listening in live and you like have a question for Adrian, please do let us know. I do think that I always tell people that I have cracked the formula for being an overnight success. Do you want to know what that is, Adrian?
Sure, please share.
The formula for being an overnight success is that it takes 10 years. And then
Hmm.
you become an overnight success. And there is something funny about that 10 years. I have often heard just recently the founders of Notion, that software that we have a lot of
Hmm.
people use, shared their backstage of what it was like to scale Notion to the user base that they have today. And again, I was like, my kitchen table hypothesis of 10 years is correct. Everybody's using
Hmm.
Notion now. It seems like they've always had it right. But they did really take back the curtain on the missteps, the back and forth that happened before it reached where it did. So I think
Hmm.
if you don't have the patience for staying the long term, that's okay. You don't have to be in judgment over yourself about it. But just being realistic is going to be helpful, and having social support, whether it's plugging into communities of people similar like yourself or
Hmm.
finding a group of people who understand the struggles, I think can go a very long way. What did you find most surprising? Today you've written a book, you can look back, and in
Hmm.
hindsight is always 2020. But what was most surprising for you when you went independent?
I guess for me is the ease of transition, and I think I'm coming from a position of privilege because a couple of things that I've done consistently beforehand, which was not intended at all, is really very much accidental. Firstly, building that personal branding as a subject matter expertise
Hmm.
in
Yes.
HR technology, that really helped. And that, like you said earlier on, 10 years to be an overnight success. It took a very long time. It took a very long time of content creation, where obviously at that point in time, there's nothing in it for me outside of pure interest, but I continue to go at it. So when a bit of backstory, after I exited from my recruitment business, I actually wanted to get into the tech business, or specifically the HR tech business. Not on my own, but to just to join one. I interviewed at LinkedIn, hire.com. I didn't get a job. So I started to write about HR tech. And I then, in 2017, decided to create this HR tech market map that covers Singapore. That thing went viral, and I continued to do it 2018, 2019, 2020. And interestingly, that map was one of the key reasons why I got into.
Oh, Adrian, you're frozen. I hope we can get you back, but there seems to be a technical glitch. I think the point that Adrian was, let's hope he's back in a second or two. The point that Adrian was making about personal branding is a really important one, because even if you don't have a product, having a personal brand can really make a difference. So, anyway, Adrian, you're back. So, I'll let you
Hmm.
continue with the story.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was gone for a while. So, yes, personal branding is very important and you have to time and effort behind it. And I guess I come from a generation where it's not so much about doing dancing TikTok video. It's more about deep thoughts and trying to decipher and look at things from different angles. And those are usually done in writing. So you just have to keep doing it and continue to do it on a very regular basis. So for anyone out there who wants to start something, I always tell them, start writing about it. You don't have to be a subject matter expert in it. You don't, if you're interested in I don't know, mechanical engineering. It's if you are writing for a magazine or a news outlet about mechanical engineering, you don't have to be a mechanical engineer. That's not step one.
Hmm. Oh gosh, we've had another technical glitch. This is surprising. I've never had these kind of glitches happen in live stream before. So I'm again hoping that Adrian will be back in just a second, because I also see a question from Sandrine here, which I think is a really good question. So let's give it a minute, and if not, then we might have to end the stream and ask Adrian to let us know the answer to some of your questions you're sending later. But that's the joy of live stream. You have him, now you don't. Now he's back.
Yes, now I'm back. My
Yeah.
internet seems to be okay. I'm not sure why.
I think maybe technology, if we had it under control, you wouldn't need humans, is how I say it.
Mm.
But I do want to take a few quick questions before we round up. One is the question is, how were you able to refine your business model? Can you discuss how you engaged potential prospects before you went
Mm.
out on your own?
Refinement requires a lot of feedback. So you have to refine along the way. When I first started, I have assignments in fractional role. I have assignments on content. I have assignments on even doing podcasts, etc. And of course, I also have my own teaching assignment. So along the way, you know what you like, what you don't like. For me, I know I hate teaching. I tried it twice. I hated it. Yeah, so I don't intend to do it anymore. I don't even intend to. If people ask me, oh, can you do a half-day workshop? Immediate answer is no, because I know I hated it. Yeah, I'm the kind of people, even as a trainer, even if 90% or 99% of the class are paying attention, my fixation will be on that 1% who is not paying attention, and I would think that I did a bad job. So because of this kind of character flaw, so I don't feel that I'm suited to be a trainer. So likewise, along the way, you're going to get all this feedback, you're going to see all these different signals, and it will just click for you. And also for me, I want to do things where by virtue of me turning up, I already win half the battle, which is why I
Ah,
continue to stick in the HR tech space, because within that space, I'm known for. If I try to step into the sales tech, MarTech, etc., I have to start from the very bottom. So it's if you climb up Mount Everest, the last thing you want to do is realize, oh no, I took the wrong turn. And for you to go back to base camp and then do another turn, you do not want to do it. But of course,
yeah.
having said that, it also depends on whether you see the prospect of that sector. Like for instance, if HR tech, I know for sure it's going to sunset, then you want to get out as soon as you can. Yeah,
Mm.
so that's one thing. The other question, what's the other question again? Okay, how you engage. For me, because I already know many of these vendors, so I basically WhatsApp a lot of them. And also at the same time, I have, when I first started out, I think I have about the 20 plus thousand connections on LinkedIn. So that really helped to drive the word out there. And the good thing is, as someone fractional, as someone independent, I don't really need a lot of assignment. Yeah, if I send out to 10 and 2 responded and that converts, it's good enough for me. I cannot even take on new assignments if I want to. And I realized when I first started, I had 5 assignments. I almost drove myself nuts. In all reality, if you want to pursue this path, at best 2, 3 assignments. Yeah, 2 assignments I think is the most ideal to hit a balance between financial income as well as your personal time freedom. But if you want to have a better Christmas or go for a long holiday, okay, maybe 3 assignments.
I hope that answers your question, Jamie. We'll take one more question before we wind up. And this is from Sandrine. She says, what kind of companies, size, industry, market, hire fractional CMOs, CHROs, or other fractional resources? And how big is the demand in Singapore?
So to the first question, based on my personal observation, the size of the organization would be relatively small. I would say no larger than 50 packs. Now, this 50 packs may not be maybe 50 to 100, depending on the function of it. And these are not just company that is in totality 50 to 100. It could be their Singapore office, which you are part of, for example, only have that few people. Like for instance, for my very first client, they had a total of I think about maybe 80 people, but Singapore office they have less than 10. And then for some other clients, they are like 20 people, so on and so forth. So those I believe would be the sweet spot because ultimately, let's be real. I feel fractional CXO ultimately is just a stopgap from an emerging period to when they really become very prosperous.
Hmm.
You cannot expect a company like a DBS Bank or a Singapore Airline hiring someone on a fractional basis. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
So any fractional individual are at best a stopgap. And you have to accept that as well. So you have to bring them to skill to the next level and then you move on to another assignment. So it's like people in the military going on tour of duty. So after one tour, you go to another tour, go on another tour. So something
Hmm.
along that line.
I'm really glad Sandrine asked that question because I think that's an important nuance to understand. And also, I think some of the bigger companies have the resources and the staying power to have somebody in the longer role. But one thing I might say, we may see some of this changing. I do see in the longer run with AI coming in, the employment
Mm,
patterns shifting in a very big way. And
mm,
I can see a future where it makes sense to have fractional CMOs in roles that maybe less intensive in terms of the human touch. It's an interesting conversation. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they said the field of accounting, for instance, is undergoing a huge shakeup, because with the coming in of AI, etc., you don't need those many people to be accountants. I think it's a development that we may see changing, but for now, I completely find it interesting that you're saying that it's that stopgap approach. So anyway, I think we are out of time. It has been an interesting conversation, and I hope everybody who is romancing the idea of stepping out of the corporate world has had a few good pointers on what it takes. And like I said, we do have another episode on this as well, so go check that out. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, please do go to www.leadersupgraded, because who doesn't want an upgrade, whether it's in life, career, hotel, or airlines, and subscribe to this. And thank you so much again, Adrian. We will link to your book and your website in the show notes so people can find you. But really appreciate the time you took to pull back the curtain and helping the audience understand nuances of going independent better. So thank you so much. We've someone saying, great advice, thank you. So we hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tavi. Had a great time.
Bye, everyone.
That concludes this episode of Leaders Upgraded. But wait, your journey is just getting started. Go to www.leadersupgraded.com for more insights, more inspiration, and more tools to continue the journey. And if you have someone who you would like to nominate for the podcast, or a particular topic you'd like us to cover, then also visit www.leadersupgraded.com and let us know. If you like this episode, please do share it. Please do subscribe to the podcast. And I look forward to continued upgrades with you. Take care.